White Heavy Checkmark Part 1. The beginning. 600 words. Hook. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't ask for attention, but somehow quiets everything around it. I hadn't heard that sound in years, not since childhood maybe, when the world still felt simple, and songs like Ek Moda Hathi Gum Chala played on the radio in my mother's kitchen. Funny how one laugh can bring all that back. The cafe was almost empty that evening, only the hum of an espresso machine and the flicker of warm light over wooden tables. She sat by the window, her shawl the color of fading sunlight, hair falling in waves she didn't bother to fix. I'd seen her before, once or twice, maybe more. Always alone, always reading something she never seemed to finish. I don't know why I noticed her that day. Maybe it was the way she stared out the glass, not watching anything, just waiting. I walked up to return the cup she'd dropped earlier, a small accident, but enough for me to have a reason. "Excuse me," I said, voice too low at first. "You left this." She looked up, and that was the first time our eyes really met. There was nothing dramatic about it, just the quiet shock of two people realizing they'd been seen. "Oh," she said, smiling faintly, her fingers brushing mine as she took the cup. "Thank you." Her hand was warm, her touch brief but deliberate, or maybe I only imagined that. We spoke about small things at first, how winter came late this year, how the cafe always smelled like burnt toast, how she liked sitting by that window because the world moved slower there. Her voice carried the softness of someone who'd once spoken too much and learned the beauty of silence. Sometimes she paused mid-sentence, as if checking whether she'd said too much already. Sometimes I filled those pauses with words that didn't matter, just to stay in that moment a little longer. The barista changed the song. Children's music, a strange old tune. Ek Moda Hathi Gum Chala. We both looked up at the same time and laughed, embarrassed, amused, unsure why. "It's silly," she said, shaking her head. "I used to sing that for my son when he was little. Maybe that's why it sounds familiar," I replied. "My mom used to play it too." Her expression softened, like she'd stepped into a memory she wasn't ready to leave. "Funny," she murmured. "Some things follow us, even when we think we've outgrown them." For a few seconds we didn't speak. Only the music played, gentle, innocent, oddly comforting. But beneath it, there was something else. The stillness between us wasn't empty, it was full of everything we weren't saying. Her hand rested near mine on the table, close enough that the air felt charged. She didn't move it away, and I didn't either. Outside, the wind picked up, pressing the rain against the window in soft patterns. She looked toward the glass again, her reflection merging with mine. "I should go," she said quietly, though she didn't move. "Or you could stay," I said, softer than I meant to, careful not to sound like a question. The doorbell chimed, someone else entering, breaking the moment. She blinked, drew back slightly, her shawl slipping from her shoulder. I reached out to help, fingers brushing the edge of the fabric. She looked at me then, a glance that lasted just a beat too long. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that says this isn't over, even if no one else would understand why. End of Part 1, cliffhanger. The interruption leaves them both aware that something has begun. White Heavy Checkmark Part 2, expanding the conflict, 500 words. It had been 3 days since that moment by the window. 3 days of replaying her glance, the half-smile that didn't reach her eyes, the unfinished warmth between us. I told myself it was nothing. Just politeness, curiosity, coincidence. But when I walked past the cafe again and saw her sitting there, same window, same shawl, I knew coincidence didn't linger that long. She noticed me before I decided whether to go in. A faint, knowing smile tugged at her lips as if she'd been expecting me all along. "You again," she said when I stepped closer. "I could say the same," I replied. She gestured toward the seat across from her. "You're early for someone who doesn't drink coffee." "Maybe I just like the music here," I said. "The music?" She raised an eyebrow. "Or the company?" Her teasing wasn't cruel. It was the kind that hides its own uncertainty. She wasn't used to being noticed like that anymore, I could tell. There was a hesitation behind her confidence, like she'd forgotten what it felt like to be someone's attention. The conversation drifted. She spoke about her work, editing textbooks, long hours, quiet evenings. A son studying abroad. A marriage that ended gently, with no villains, just distance that grew too familiar. I think we mistook silence for peace, she said, until it became all that was left. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell her she deserved to be looked at the way I looked at her. But I just nodded. That sounds heavy. It's lighter now, she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. But sometimes I miss the weight. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Inside, the space between us shrank. Her sleeve brushed against my arm when she leaned closer to ask something. I didn't hear the question, just the warmth of her breath against my skin, the faint scent of coffee and rain. I think she noticed my pause, the way my eyes lingered too long before I looked away. You're very young, she said finally, almost to herself. Is that what you see? I asked. She hesitated. It's what I'm supposed to see. The words sat between us like a small, fragile truth neither of us wanted to touch. I laughed quietly. You say that like it's a warning. Maybe it is, she said, and for a second, her tone faltered. You don't know how messy people can be when they start needing each other. Her hand moved, unintentionally, maybe, and brushed mine again. This time she didn't pull away immediately. I felt the tremor in her fingers, the small conflict between retreat and reach. The world outside kept moving, footsteps, laughter, traffic, but in that tiny pause, everything else blurred. She exhaled slowly, her voice a whisper that barely reached me. We should both go before this starts meaning something it shouldn't. But neither of us moved. And when she finally stood, gathering her shawl, her hand lingered on my shoulder, light, uncertain, but real. Good night, she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray her calm. I watched her leave, the echo of her touch still there, proof that something fragile had already begun to break open. End of Part 2, cliffhanger. The boundary between them has blurred, and neither knows how to step back. White heavy checkmark Part 3, heightening suspense, 500 words. The next time we met, it wasn't planned, or maybe it was, in the quiet, unspoken way people find reasons to cross the same streets twice. She was standing outside the bookstore when I saw her, hair tied back, a light scarf around her neck, the kind of detail that shouldn't matter but somehow did. Didn't expect to see you here, I said. Neither did I, she replied, though the faint curve of her lips said otherwise. Inside, the shop smelled of dust and paper and rain carried in on our clothes. We stood too close in the narrow aisle, our shoulders brushing every time one of us pretended to reach for a book. She picked up a collection of poetry, tracing the spine. I used to read this to someone, she said. Someone important? Her eyes flickered toward me. Someone who stopped listening. For a moment neither of us moved. I wanted to ask more, to know everything, but the air between us was already too heavy with what we weren't saying. A phone buzzed. Her bag. She hesitated, then answered. Her voice lowered, gentler somehow. Yes, I'm fine. No, just out for a bit. Yes, I ate. When she hung up, she noticed my glance. My son, she said. He worries too much. I smiled softly. Sounds like he loves you. She nodded. He does. That's why I shouldn't be here. The words hit harder than I expected. She wasn't accusing me, just reminding herself of the world outside this small, dim bookstore. I didn't ask you to be, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it harder. Silence settled again, the kind that hums louder than words. I stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume, subtle, like jasmine fading at dusk. She looked up, startled by how near I'd come. Her breath caught. You shouldn't, then tell me to stop, I said, though I didn't touch her. She didn't answer. Just stared, eyes flickering between resistance and something dangerously close to surrender. The world outside blurred, footsteps, pages turning, a distant bell above the door. Everything felt suspended in the half-light between wanting and knowing better. Then, "Hey!" A familiar voice broke the spell. It was my friend from college, walking straight toward us, grin wide, unsuspecting. I stepped back just in time, pretending to study a random book. "Didn't know you liked poetry," he joked, glancing at her. "Trying something new," I said quickly. My voice didn't sound like mine. She smiled politely, too practiced, the mask sliding perfectly into place. The kind of calm only people with secrets learn to wear. After he left, we both exhaled at once, the sound more confession than relief. "That was close," she murmured. "Too close," I said. Our eyes met again, a spark, quick and quiet. The fear of being seen mixed with the pull of what almost was. This time, when she turned to leave, I caught her hand without thinking. Just for a second. Just enough for both of us to feel it, the danger, the pull, the impossible weight of wanting something we shouldn't. Neither of us said a word. But as she walked away, she didn't let go immediately. Her fingers lingered, just long enough to make it clear that whatever this was, it wasn't ending any time soon. End of Part 3, Cliffhanger. They'd been caught on the edge, too close to deny, too afraid to name it. Why heavy checkmark Part 4, nearing the climax, 500 words. The sky had turned the color of smoke when I found her again. She was standing under the awning outside the cafe, the same one where it all began, watching the rain fall in sheets. "You'll get drenched," I said. She didn't look away from the street. "Maybe I need to." Water gathered in her hair, along the curve of her neck. I offered my jacket. She hesitated before taking it, slipping it over her shoulders as if borrowing something heavier than fabric. Inside, the cafe lights flickered. We took the same table, the world outside muffled by rain. For a long time neither of us spoke. The air felt charged, too full of everything left unsaid. Finally she sighed. "You should stop showing up here." I tried. "And?" "It didn't work." Her laugh was soft, almost sad. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, though my hand shook slightly against the cup. She studied me, long enough for the silence to turn intimate. Then, quietly, "People talk. They'll think it's something it shouldn't be. And what if it already is?" That made her look away. A muscle tightened along her jaw. "Don't say that." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then tell me you don't think about it too." Her breath hitched. The denial didn't come. Instead, she pressed her fingers to her temple, as if trying to hold back words that wanted out. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. "You remind me of everything I stopped allowing myself to feel." The sentence hung between us, raw and trembling. She looked at me then, really looked, eyes glassy with the kind of fear that comes from wanting something you've already decided you can't have. I reached across the table, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. My fingertips caught against her skin, warm, fragile, alive. She didn't move. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "Then tell me to stop." Her eyes flickered shut for a second, lips parted as if searching for breath. The rain outside thundered, the sound almost drowning the heartbeat pounding between us. "I can't keep pretending," I said, my voice low. "Every time you walk away, it feels like something's being undone." She stood abruptly, pushing the chair back, but not to leave. She stepped closer instead, until she was right beside me. I could feel the heat from her skin through the jacket I'd given her. "This isn't fair," she murmured. "No," I said, looking up at her. "It isn't." Her hand came to rest on my shoulder. Mine found her wrist without thinking. For a moment we just stood there, caught in the space between right and inevitable. Then the lights flickered again, an interruption, brief but enough to break the trance. She drew in a breath that sounded like restraint. "If I stay," she whispered, "everything changes." "And if you leave?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her fingers brushed my cheek, slow, deliberate, and the world narrowed to that single motion. The distance between us vanished until only one breath remained. And just before it could happen, before choice could turn into consequence, the cafe door swung open. Someone called her name. She froze. End of Part 4, Cliffhanger. A confession half spoken, a moment interrupted at its peak. Why heavy checkmark Part 5, the twist, 500 words. The door had barely shut when she turned back to me. Her face had gone pale, all warmth drained. That was my ex-husband, she said quietly. The words hit harder than they should have. He hadn't seen me, she made sure of it, but the sound of her name on his tongue lingered like a warning neither of us could ignore. He still checks on me, she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed her shawl. Old habits. Some people don't know when to stop caring. I swallowed. And you? Her eyes met mine. Some people don't know when to stop being found. Silence pressed between us again, but it felt different now, tense, uneasy. The moment that had almost become something real was now shadowed by a past neither of us had invited in. You should go, she whispered. Is that what you want? No, she said too fast. Then softer. But it's what I have to say. Her honesty disarmed me more than her distance ever could. When she turned to leave, I followed her outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and sharp. Street lights gleamed off puddles, reflecting the two of us, blurred, unsteady, side by side. You didn't tell me, I said. There was nothing to tell. You could have said he still comes around. That you still. She stopped walking. Still what? I hesitated, searching for the right word. None fit. Still matter to him, I said finally. She laughed, but it wasn't joy, it was defense. You think that's what this is about? Her tone cracked slightly, and something in me did too. I wasn't lying, she said. I just didn't think I owed you my ghosts. She looked at me then, eyes fierce, wet, alive. Do you really believe this is simple? That I can just want you and not think of everything I could lose? I never asked you to lose anything. No, she said softly. But you make me remember what it feels like to want to. The confession landed like a spark in dry air. She stepped back, but I mirrored her movement, closing the distance again. Then stop fighting it, I said. Her hand lifted, almost involuntarily, brushing against my chest as if testing whether I was real. I caught her wrist before she could pull away. The contact was light but electric, her pulse quick beneath my thumb. This isn't about age, I said quietly. It's about fear. She drew in a sharp breath. And you think you're not afraid? I am, I admitted. But I'm here anyway. For a second, it felt like the world had narrowed to just that, two people standing too close, every breath shared, every reason blurred. Then she whispered, almost to herself. If anyone finds out, everything I've built disappears. I stepped back, finally understanding. That was the truth she hadn't said, not about love, but about consequence. She turned away, voice trembling. You should decide now what you want this to mean. End of Part 5, Cliffhanger. The revelation forces them to choose, between safety and the truth of what they feel. Why heavy checkmark Part 5, the twist, 500 words. The door had barely shut when she turned back to me. Her face had gone pale, all warmth drained. That was my ex-husband, she said quietly. The words hit harder than they should have. He hadn't seen me, she made sure of it, but the sound of her name on his tongue lingered like a warning neither of us could ignore. He still checks on me, she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed her shawl. Old habits. Some people don't know when to stop caring. I swallowed. And you? Her eyes met mine. Some people don't know when to stop being found. Silence pressed between us again, but it felt different now, tense, uneasy. The moment that had almost become something real was now shadowed by a past neither of us had invited in. You should go, she whispered. Is that what you want? No, she said too fast. Then softer. But it's what I have to say. Her honesty disarmed me more than her distance ever could. When she turned to leave, I followed her outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and sharp. Street lights gleamed off puddles, reflecting the two of us, blurred, unsteady, side by side. "You didn't tell me," I said. "There was nothing to tell. You could have said he still comes around. That you still—" She stopped walking. "Still what?" I hesitated, searching for the right word. None fit. "Still matter to him," I said finally. She laughed, but it wasn't joy, it was defense. "You think that's what this is about?" Her tone cracked slightly, and something in me did too. "I wasn't lying," she said. "I just didn't think I owed you my ghosts." She looked at me then, eyes fierce, wet, alive. "Do you really believe this is simple? That I can just want you and not think of everything I could lose? I never asked you to lose anything." "No," she said softly. "But you make me remember what it feels like to want to." The confession landed like a spark in dry air. She stepped back, but I mirrored her movement, closing the distance again. "Then stop fighting it," I said. Her hand lifted, almost involuntarily, brushing against my chest as if testing whether I was real. I caught her wrist before she could pull away. The contact was light but electric, her pulse quick beneath my thumb. "This isn't about age," I said quietly. "It's about fear." She drew in a sharp breath. "And you think you're not afraid?" "I am," I admitted. "But I'm here anyway." For a second, it felt like the world had narrowed to just that, two people standing too close, every breath shared, every reason blurred. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "If anyone finds out, everything I've built disappears." I stepped back, finally understanding. That was the truth she hadn't said, not about love, but about consequence. She turned away, voice trembling. "You should decide now what you want this to mean." End of Part 5, Cliffhanger. The revelation forces them to choose, between safety and the truth of what they feel. Why heavy checkmark Part 6, the climax, 500 words, it happened late, later than it should have. The city had gone quiet, the streetlights dimmed to a sleepy amber. She had called me. No explanation, no small talk. Just, "Can you come?" When I reached her apartment, she was standing by the window, the city lights flickering against her face. "I shouldn't have," she said as soon as I stepped in. "I know," I answered. "But you came. You knew I would." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with everything we tried not to say. She turned back to the window, her reflection overlapping with mine in the glass. "Do you ever wish you could unknow someone?" "No," I said. "Just the parts that hurt." She exhaled slowly, as if that answer broke something open inside her. When she finally faced me, her expression had changed, softer, stripped of all the careful restraint she usually wore. "I've tried to stop this," she whispered. "Every time I see you, I tell myself it has to end." "Then end it," I said, even though my voice betrayed me. She took one step closer. Then another. The air shifted, warm, electric, fragile. I could hear the faint sound of her bracelet moving against her wrist, the soft hitch in her breathing. "I can't," she said. The distance between us vanished until her hand brushed against my shirt, trembling slightly. She looked up, eyes glassy with fear and something far deeper. "Tell me this isn't real," I said quietly. She didn't. She just shook her head, eyes never leaving mine. I reached out, hesitant at first, fingers grazing the side of her arm, tracing the faint line of goosebumps that followed my touch. She didn't step back. Her voice broke when she spoke again. "You don't know what you're asking me to risk." "I'm not asking you to risk anything," I said. "Just to stop pretending you don't already have." That made her smile, sad and small. "You think this is courage?" "No," I said. "It's honesty." We stood there, breaths tangled, the quiet hum of the city below us like a heartbeat we shared. Then, very slowly, she reached up, brushing a raindrop from my hair. Her fingers lingered near my cheek, tracing the outline of something neither of us could name. I used to believe love had to make sense, she murmured. That it had to be tidy, timed, appropriate. And now? Now I think it just has to be true. The words hung there, final and fragile. We didn't move any closer, but we didn't move apart either. There was no space left for pretending. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were calm, clear. Whatever happens next, she said softly, we can't go back to before. I nodded. I don't want to. The rain started again, faint against the window. And for the first time, there was no hesitation left between us, only the quiet certainty that whatever this was, it had already changed everything. End of Part 6, Climax. They finally stop hiding, understanding each other completely. Whatever comes next, denial is no longer possible. White heavy checkmark Part 7, the conclusion, 500 words. Morning came quietly, like it was afraid to wake us. She was still by the window, wrapped in the same shawl from that first day in the cafe. The light fell across her face, soft and golden, catching the tired smile she gave me when I walked in. You didn't sleep, I said. She shook her head. Didn't want to. The room smelled of coffee and rain. A half-read book lay open on the table, pages curled from humidity. Everything felt still, simple in a way that made the night before seem like a dream we hadn't yet named. I sat across from her. No words at first, just quiet understanding. Last night, she began, then paused. It felt like something ended. Or began, I said. Her eyes lifted to mine, cautious, hopeful. You really think we can make sense of this? Maybe we don't have to, I said. Maybe it's enough that it's real. She laughed softly, the same laugh that had stopped me the first day we met. You always make it sound easy. It isn't, I admitted. But neither is pretending it doesn't matter. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like peace finally finding its place between us. She reached out, fingers brushing the edge of my sleeve, a small gesture that said more than words could. I took her hand, feeling it relax in mine, the tension that had always lived there finally easing. You're not afraid? She asked quietly. I was, I said. Of what people might say, of how different we are. But when I'm with you, I stop caring about what doesn't belong to us. Her eyes softened. You make it sound brave. Maybe it's just honest. She leaned forward slightly, her forehead resting against mine, the faintest sigh escaping her lips. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed, but everything inside us had. For the first time, there was no hesitation, no guilt, no trying to explain something that didn't need permission. Just warmth, and the steady rhythm of being seen. When she finally pulled back, she smiled. You know, I never liked endings. Then let's not make this one, I said. We sat there a long time, hands intertwined, the city slowly waking around us. There was no grand declaration, no promises too big to keep, just two people who had finally stopped running from the truth. Maybe that's what love really was. Not fireworks or forever, but the quiet decision to stay when you finally can. She looked at me one last time before standing, her fingers still linked with mine. Coffee? Always. The sound of her laughter filled the room again, soft, certain, alive. And for the first time, it didn't echo with distance.